20 million people watched Ed Gein on Netflix. But here's what almost everyone missed. This isn't ancient history. It's a warning about 2025. We've covered Ed Gein's crimes, the philosophy of how isolation destroyed his mind, why we can't stop thinking about his story. Now the question nobody's asking, what are we supposed to do with this? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The conditions that created Ed Gein haven't gone away. They've gotten worse. The World Health Organization declared loneliness a global health epidemic in 2023. Social isolation is now as dangerous as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And we're seeing the effects everywhere. Rising mental health crises, increasing social withdrawal, people losing touch with the reality in ways that would have seemed impossible 20 years ago. Ed Gein isn't just a horror story. He's a case study in what happens when we ignore isolation until it's too late. So what do we actually do about it? Here's the lesson Ed Gein's fractured existence teaches us. Humanity isn't permanent, it's practiced. Every day, through connection, through seeing each other as fully human, through maintaining the social bonds that keep us grounded in reality. Remove that practice and humanity doesn't just weaken, it dissolves. Not into active evil, into absence. The absence of empathy, of boundaries, of the moral framework that makes us capable of recognizing others as real. This sounds abstract, but it's not. Ed Gein had no genetic predisposition to violence, no brain abnormalities, no inherent evil. He had isolation, complete total pathological isolation for over 40 years. And that was enough to unmake him. Not because he was weak, because that's what isolation does. To anyone, given enough time and complete disconnection. The neuroscience is clear. The psychology is settled. The case studies are overwhelming. Isolation doesn't just hurt. It distorts reality itself. And we're living through the most isolated period in human history. So what do we do? 3 things. Personal, social, and structural. First, recognize your own vulnerability. You're not immune to isolation's effects. None of us are. If you're isolated right now, if your social world has been shrinking, if weeks go by without meaningful conversation, that's not weakness. That's danger. A warning sign that requires action before it becomes pathological. Reach out, even when anxiety tells you not to. Even when depression says you're bothering people, even when it feels impossible. Connection doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be deep or profound or life-changing. It just has to exist. A conversation with a stranger, a support group, therapy, online communities if physical ones aren't accessible. Anything that reminds you that other people are real, that you're not alone in the universe, that shared reality still exists. Because here's what Ed Gein's case reveals. The longer you're isolated, the harder it becomes to connect. Isolation creates a feedback loop. You withdraw because connection feels difficult. Connection feels difficult because you've withdrawn. The cycle accelerates. Breaking it requires action before it hardens into something permanent. Second, notice others. When someone's social world shrinks, when they withdraw, when isolation becomes obvious, don't look away. Don't assume someone else will help. Don't wait until it's too late. Check in. Reach out. Offer connection even when it's awkward. A conversation could change everything. An invitation. An acknowledgement that they exist and matter. This isn't dramatics. It's documented intervention science. Social connection is protective, not just against loneliness, against the distortion of reality that happens when someone has no external feedback about what's normal. Ed Gein had nobody. For decades. No one checking in. No one noticing his deterioration. No one intervening before his mind fractured completely. That's preventable. Not through professional intervention necessarily. Through basic human attention. Seeing when someone's struggling. Offering presence. Refusing to let people become invisible. It sounds simple. It is simple. but it's also life-saving, because isolation kills, not just metaphorically, literally, through suicide, through deteriorating mental health, through the erosion of everything that keeps us human, and in extreme cases, through the complete dissolution of moral boundaries. Third, we build systems that don't let people fall through cracks. This isn't just individual responsibility, it's collective. Mental health resources that are actually accessible, social programs that connect isolated people, community spaces where connection happens organically, systems that recognize isolation as the public health emergency it is. Right now, we treat loneliness like a personal failing, like if someone's isolated, they should just try harder to connect. But Ed Gein tried. He joined community organizations. He babysat for neighbors. He attempted connection. But after decades of maternal control and abuse, he didn't know how. His social skills never developed. Connection felt impossible. And nobody noticed. Nobody intervened. Nobody built the bridge he couldn't build himself. That's the system failure. We need communities that actively prevent isolation, that notice when someone's withdrawing, that respond before loneliness hardens into pathology, schools that teach social-emotional skills, workplaces that prioritize human connection over productivity metrics, neighborhoods designed for interaction, not isolation, mental health care that's preventive, not just reactive, that catches deterioration early before someone loses touch with reality. This sounds idealistic, but it's not. It's practical public health. Because the alternative, waiting until isolation creates tragedy, is far more expensive in human suffering, in social costs, in preventable harm. The conditions that created Ed Gein exist everywhere: rural isolation, urban loneliness, digital connection that feels real but isn't, people slipping through cracks, becoming invisible, losing their grip on shared reality. And we're doing the same thing society did in 1940 Wisconsin. Nothing. Assuming someone else will help. Assuming isolated people will figure it out. Assuming the problem will resolve itself. It won't. Isolation accelerates. Mental health deteriorates. Reality becomes negotiable when there's no social reinforcement of boundaries. And by the time we notice, it's often too late. Prevention requires attention, resources, systems designed to catch people before they fall, communities where everyone is seen, where social connection is treated as infrastructure, not luxury, where isolation is recognized as the emergency it is. That's how we prevent the next Ed Gein, not through fear, through deliberate structural commitment to ensuring nobody becomes completely alone. Here's the paradox. Studying darkness teaches us to value light. Horror films inspired by Ed Gein, Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Silence of the Lambs. They're not celebrating violence. They're processing collective anxiety, about isolation, about fragility, about what lurks in the gaps when connection disappears. These stories are warnings, not entertainment. Warnings about what happens when human development fails, when isolation becomes total, when nobody intervenes. And warnings work. They make us vigilant. They make us recognize danger before it's too late. That's why Ed Gein's story still matters 70 years later. Not because of what he did, because of what he represents. The ordinary person, the outsider, the isolated mind that fractures when all connection is severed. That could be anyone under the wrong circumstances. Not because we're all potential criminals, because we're all dependent on connection for our humanity. Remove connection long enough and anyone loses their grip on empathy, on boundaries, on the moral framework that keeps us human. That's terrifying, but it's also empowering, because if darkness is created rather than innate, it can be prevented through connection, through intervention, through refusing to let isolation become pathological, through recognizing the signs early, through building communities that catch people before they fall. through treating connection not as comfort but as necessity, as the foundation of everything that makes us human. That's prevention, not through grand gestures, through ordinary human decency, consistently applied, through seeing each other, reaching out, refusing to let anyone become invisible, through building systems that prioritize human connection over convenience or profit, through recognizing that when we allow people to fall through cracks, we all pay the price, in tragedy, in harm, in the dissolution of the social fabric that keeps everyone sane. So here's what 20 million Netflix viewers need to understand. Ed Gein's story isn't about one man in rural Wisconsin. It's about all of us, about the choice we face constantly, between connection and isolation, between seeing others as human or letting them become abstractions, between noticing when someone's struggling or looking away until it's too late. Every time we reach out to someone who's withdrawn, we prevent future harm. Every time we notice loneliness and respond with kindness, we strengthen the bonds that keep everyone grounded. Every time we choose connection over convenience, we practice the humanity that isolation tries to destroy. This isn't dramatic, it's daily. Small acts, conversations, presence. But accumulated over time across communities, these acts create the environment where minds don't fracture, where isolation doesn't become pathological, where everyone has connection to shared reality. Netflix's Monster showed you the horror, the crimes, the fractured mind. But it couldn't show you this. That horror was preventable. Not easily, not obviously, but preventable. If mental health resources had existed in 1940s Wisconsin, if community members had recognized pathological isolation and intervened, if anyone had noticed one lonely man slipping further from reality every year, but nobody did, and a mind broke, and the consequences echoed through decades. We can't change what happened to Ed Gein, but we can change what happens next. By recognizing isolation as danger, by treating connection as necessity, by building communities where nobody falls through the cracks, by practicing empathy deliberately, by seeing each other as fully human, by refusing to let anyone become so alone they lose touch with reality. That's the lesson. That's why his story matters, not as entertainment, as warning, as reminder, that humanity isn't permanent, it's practiced.